Welcome to another edition of The Angel Nest, where real angel investors and entrepreneurs partner to build great new companies. I'm David Hemingway. I'm a 5-time founder and now an active angel investor, and my mission here is to help great companies find the investors that will help them succeed. We don't make or recommend investments at The Angel Nest, and this program is for informational purposes only. Today, we're talking about banks and how they evaluate and assess the risks they take when they make loans to customers. Judging the credit risk of the borrowers is one of banking's most essential, regulated, and labor-intensive functions. Now, RiskRobot, from a company called Spin Analytics, is preserving the critical parts of the job while eliminating the labor-intensive and tedious parts of the process. Their software can automate months of drudge work down to minutes. It's not robots making decisions or even deciding on models. The founders say that RiskRobot industrializes one of the last manual functions in financial services. They've proven the concept with successful pilots with Standard Chartered, BBVA, and ING in Europe, and now they're bringing RiskRobot to America. And they've recently been named one of 12 participants in the New York Partnership Fund's FinTech Innovation Lab, supported by Accenture. We'd like to welcome the CEO and founder, Panos Skliamis, and one of his first investors, a FinTech expert, a former lead Oliver Wyman partner in Europe, and veteran bank board member, Andrew Stott. Thanks to you both for joining us.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David.
And from here in New York, we welcome Mark Entrada, the North American market lead and vice president for Spin Analytics. Thanks for being with us, Mark.
Good morning, David.
And just before we start, there's news, actually, that RiskRobot is now available on Microsoft's Azure cloud platform. And a recent report from Microsoft on using AI to reshape risk management said that Spin Analytics provides a solution to deliver regulatory model documentation in minutes instead of weeks or months. That's a pretty exciting endorsement. So, Panos, what inspired you to develop RiskRobot?
Our idea started when we identified a big gap in the market, that everything is still manual. And when I'm saying manual, I mean all the processes that the banks have to follow in order to arrive at a full credit risk model, which is going to be regulated by the Fed in your example. Actually, it's a manual process, which takes weeks, months, and sometimes even years. So that was the main reason that allowed us to experiment, innovate, and apply our, let's say, thought process in a way that we develop something which works. And this is RiskRobot.
Now, we don't have robots making loans, right? It's a tool for greater efficiency.
So actually, the biggest advantage of RiskRobot is that the teams in every bank, they can do the same quality of job, but faster and more efficient. This means we're taking out all the boring stuff that they had to do up to now, like data cleansing, model development, validation, and monitoring, and they can focus on their expertise. They can apply their expertise as they were applying before, but now in a fraction of the time. And that's a big change because actually, apart from complying, now you can expand the bank.
And you've already done some successful pilots with some of the world's largest banks in Europe. Panos, what have you learned from that?
The important thing is that all the things that we mentioned today are the reality here. So it's not too good to be true. But this has been validated by global tier one banks. And we think that US banks will adopt this faster because the market is homogeneous, which is another big advantage in the US.
Andrew Stott, you have over 40 years experience in banking. And in fact, you're a past board member of BBVA and the Spanish arm of Barclays. And you've chaired board risk committees, so you seem like you have the right perspective to help us understand why RiskRobot is valuable to banks.
Well, essentially, it represents a dramatic step forward in credit risk modeling, similar to a tool like Adobe Photoshop for photographers. It changes the world of the credit risk modelers. So historically, credit risk modeling has taken teams of experts and consultants 6 to 12 months to build credit risk models, and then updating them weeks or possibly months every time a regulatory change happens or decisions are made to update the model. And this has been generally a painful, partly manual experience, although some steps are already being automated by banks. But RiskRobot transforms the credit risk model development process because it offers an end-to-end automation of the steps required. It doesn't replace credit risk experts, it leverages them. So it allows them to see what the recommendations are of RiskRobot, they can modify them and change them. And there's also an auditable and traceable record of the changes that have been made. So it's very transparent. And obviously, being transparent, it can produce documentation that is compliant with the regulatory requirements. So this is, in my view, a very, very powerful tool to support credit risk model development. And this will change the whole process. So I expect that banks around the world will be adopting RiskRobot over the next 12 to 24 months, without a doubt.
So, Andrew, you're the first outside investor in RiskRobot, and you even convinced some of your colleagues to invest. What persuaded you in the beginning to get involved?
Well, the introduction was from a fellow board member at BBVA, Sunil Kapoor, who's a tech investor and partner at Atlantic Bridge and based in Silicon Valley. And he was fascinated by the proposal that Panos put, and indeed introduced Panos and Spin Analytics to BBVA, where they did a proof of concept project. And after a couple of nudges, I finally sat down with Panos, and he told me what had been they'd achieved. And I was pretty impressed, although I was still quite skeptical and felt that this was too good to be true. And so I said, well, look, we'll start and we'll do it like 3 months trial as an advisor. And 3 months in, and also following the involvement of another ex-Oliver Wyman partner who is a very technical expert, we decided that this actually was something that could potentially transform the banking industry. So as a result of that, when Panos asked me if I was interested in putting in some seed capital, I and also 2 other co-investors that I knew, we decided to do the initial seed round of $500,000. And so far, we've been very happy with the progress. And we are confident that this is going to be very transformational in the banking industry over the next 24 months.
Mark and Trotter, you came from teams that built risk models, so you know the regulatory environment. It's different in the US. There's more oversight and supervision of risk models, especially since 2008. How does that impact RiskRobot's prospects in the US?
I think RiskRobot's been designed to meet those challenges and actually to be a solver of that problem rather than a part of the problem. One thing is that while most new technologies in credit risk space are, very black box or tend to be more black box, and although they produce results that seem to predict the things well, they don't explain what they're doing, and it's hard to understand what they're doing. And that's one of the reasons why model risk teams and regulators and supervisors are reluctant to accept them. RiskRobot was designed to be very transparent. That it uses the expertise, as Panos said, of the bank's experts. It uses tried and true statistical techniques. So there's nothing super fancy going on. There's nothing mysterious going on. So what RiskRobot does is a good version. It helps the bank's analysts to do better versions and faster versions of what they were doing themselves. The second thing is that it automates not just the model building, but the documentation process. And this is key because that's what slows down the internal and external approval of models. It's not as much the building the models, explaining what was done. It's also one of the least favored tasks of the people who build models. Most of them, when they finish building a model, the last thing they want to do is go and explain all in heavy detail what they've done. They want to go into the next thing. And so by automating that process, which is the least favorite part, we get a lot of savings. And the other thing is when you have this approval process, when you have multiple layers that need to approve a model, often they'll ask to, can you make a change, or can you look at a change and see whether this would be done? And currently, making even a simple change to a model can take days, if not weeks, to go back and make that change and redo it. RiskRobot was designed to make changes very easy, so that if someone in the approval process says, oh, what about this change? That's something that can be done either on the spot or next day turnaround. And again, we see a lot of the potential savings, particularly in the US, in terms of time savings of the model. It's not just the model development process, but it's the review process It's the back and forth and making changes to get it reviewed. And that's something where there's more of a challenge in the US, but therefore there's more of an opportunity and there's more cost and effort to be saved through industrializing and automating the process.
So, Mark, most of your pilots so far have been with larger banks. Is that where you intend to focus? Is RiskRobot exclusively for big banks?
The other opportunity for RiskRobot in the United States is with small banks. And there's many small banks that don't have the technical teams who can build models themselves. So they have to use standard models that they purchase from the likes of Moody's or FICO. With RiskRobot has built the expertise into it so it can guide a user, somebody who knows credit but isn't necessarily a coder, to be able to build their own internal models. So they'll be able to keep up with the big banks and with the fintechs without needing the specialized model building coding teams.
Does RiskRobot ultimately make the banking system safer?
Yes. RiskRobot makes the banking system safer because it makes models more transparent, more easily understood, and therefore less likely to go wrong, which is part of what happened in 2008, and make it easier for banks to do a better job of evaluating credit.
So, Panos, RiskRobot is making banks safer and more efficient. Is it actually powerful enough to make banks more profitable?
So this can create actually a competitive advantage for a bank in order to enter in a market or to take the decisions about buying a loan portfolio in the case of expanding. So there are many use cases that we have approached and many ways that you can use RiskRobot in an efficient way. So this starts from simply compliance or complying with the latest regulations like Basel III. Now we're going to Basel IV. Till the other side, which means I want to expand the bank. I want to create a full suite of credit risk models because we have to launch a new credit product in the market. So traditionally, this would take 12 to 18 months for a big bank. Now it can take 1 quarter. And there is a significant difference now that we are living in an online world. So actually, banks can automate all the things that they can automate, and they can still apply their expert judgment, which is the must-have in credit risk modeling.
Panos Skliamis, Andrew Stott, and Mark Entrada, thanks for joining us for some very interesting insight into the opportunities you see in our modern banking system.
Thank you,
Thanks,
David.
David. Pleasure.
You can learn more and reach the Spin Analytics team at our website, theangelnest.com. And now for the disclaimer that we don't make or recommend investments at the Angel Nest. This program is for informational purposes only. We do not independently verify and therefore cannot be responsible for claims made by our guests or sponsors. You should always do your own research before making any investment, especially in private ventures. I'm David Hemingway. We produce the Angel Nest with help from David Newhoff. Thanks for listening, and here's hoping our angel investors and the founders they support find their next great venture. So long until next time.